All right, well, it's a good beginning. Let's keep going. Here we go. Please welcome Keith.
Hi. So I got married 8 years ago, and on the honeymoon, I felt this little pain in my stomach after about 3 days, and it got progressively worse. And by the end of the honeymoon, it was a very sharp pain, and when I looked down, I could see like a little protrusion on the side of my hip. And I decided that I was not going to tell my new wife for several reasons. One is she had been with me for a few years before we got married, and in that time I had already had some illnesses. I had a brain tumor, and I had had hepatitis, and I had had Lou Gehrig's disease. And as strange as that sounds, they all did share. They were different, but they shared one thing in common, which was they were all fake. I didn't have any of those things, and I went to a lot of doctors who told me eventually that I was a hypochondriac. And I had this going back in my life for a long time. I remember when I was 12 years old, I had a red mark on my penis, and I thought that it was cancer. And I went to my father, who was a physician, so that he could examine it. And when he looked at it, he then looked up at me and said, "Why don't you try leaving it alone for a few days?" Which it turns out was a really sound course of treatment. But I didn't want to tell my wife for another reason, which was we had just gotten married, and I didn't want our, the first couple weeks of marriage to be burdened with this. I didn't want her to have to start taking care of me as I got more ill, and I just decided I was going to be stoic, and I was going to hold on to this pain and not tell her for as long as I could. The next day, I told her I had pancreas cancer. And I knew this because I had just started a new job that day. I was a consulting producer on The Apprentice. And on my first day of work, I spent the whole day online, looking up the symptoms, which is just a terrible way to diagnose yourself. I mean, if you look up like a cough, you'll see, strep, you'll see the flu, you'll see allergies, and you just keep strolling down, and eventually you'll find, it's probably cancer, And so I told this to my wife, and she said, why don't we just wait a few days, see if maybe it feels better. Could you do that for me, please? And I said that I could. The next day, I did not go to work because I was too sick. And you never want to do that your second day on a job, and you really don't. The Apprentice is this real manly, tough guy show, and you can't even order a salad for lunch, let alone miss a day to be sick. And so I was also sick the third day, because by the third day I was completely bedridden. And this is the fastest growing cancer in the history of mankind. But I couldn't get out of bed, and I was sick, and I was not able to eat, and I was waiting for my gastroenterologist to call me later that night, because I have a specialist for everything. And finally he calls. I said, I'm so glad you called, doctor. It's just really bad. It's bad. I haven't been able to eat anything all day. And my wife says, that's not true. You had a bagel and cream cheese for breakfast. And I said, honey, please, I am on the phone with my doctor, okay? And I went into the bedroom, and I closed the door, and I told him the litany of my symptoms. And the last thing I told him was that I had some really, really bad gas. It's something I never really smelled before. It was really rich, and it had this thick egginess to it. And on the other side of the door, I hear my wife of 2 weeks go, "Oh, Jesus," and walk away. And then I came out, and I said to her, honey, the doctor wants to run some tests, but I want you to know that I'm not going to do it. And she said, why? And I said, because I just don't want to get any kind of diagnosis that's going to ruin our happiness. And she said, well, to tell you the truth, I'm not real happy right now. And I want you to go and have the tests. And then this led to this whole conversation about how am I going to tell when I find out I have cancer, how am I going to tell my friends, how am I going to tell my family, it's going to be so awful. And she said, I got an idea. We just got a video camera for our wedding. Why don't I record you? Talk to your friends, talk to your family. Because people do this, before they get sick, they want to do it while they're healthy. This seemed a little premature, but I was just so happy that she finally was acknowledging that I was probably dying, that I went along with it. So the next day we did go to the doctor, and we had a whole series of tests that lasted 6 hours. And when it was done, we were sitting with the doctor, and the doctor said, I want to tell you that you do have, and I'm thinking, here it comes, you have acid in your stomach, you have acid indigestion, and it's probably been brought on by stress. I think that this is probably something that we can manage. You told me that you just got married. Is there a possibility that knowing that you're going to be with a person for the rest of your life, and that you're going to have to be more responsible, and you're going to have to step up, that maybe this caused some stress in you? And I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what it was, and I could just feel all of the symptoms like instantly going away. I mean, and as we're walking out, my wife turns to me and goes, so basically what we learned is marriage is making you sick. And the interesting thing was it was just the opposite, which was I have not had any psychosomatic or any kind of hypochondriatic episodes in 8 years. And the truth is, marriage is what cured it. Because every time I'm feeling a little bit sick, my wife puts in that tape that she's edited down to just one sentence. And it's me looking at the camera and just like this saying, and I just want you to know, Mom, I love you. And my face just freezes in this pathetic mask of just awfulness. And what I learned about marriage is the reason to get married is so that you have a witness for your craziness. You have someone there to be there for you when you're crazy. You have someone there for you when you say to them, honey, I have to tell you something. I've had a runny nose for the last 2 weeks. She'll look at you and say, really? Well, maybe you should call the doctor again and describe your farts to him.
That was a really very well described fart. I felt like I could smell it.